Well, hello, I'm Josh, and I'm back once again with another movie to tell you about. So, in the past, I've talked about classic black and white films from the 30s, 50s, and 60s. And this week, I kind of wanted to change it up a little bit. So, I'll be talking about 1986 John Carpenter film Big Trouble in Little China. The protagonist is Jack Burton, an American trucker who, through a series of events, stumbles into a centuries old war between two ancient Chinese societies. As the battle goes on, things get very weird, and Jack's truck ends up getting stolen. This propels him into getting involved in the conflict, and he learns that the mystical Lo Pan has kidnapped the fiancée of his best friend, Wang Chi. So Burton, Wang Chi, along with Gracie, Margot, Eddie Lee, and Egg Shen set out to defeat Lo Pan and save Wang's fiancée.
Hold it, slow down. I'm feeling a little like an outsider here.
You are!
Now, as you can already tell, this movie has a very basic yet very confusing and convoluted plot. It's pretty black and white as to who the good guys and bad guys are, and yet they're still throwing you in about 3/4 into this centuries-old conflict with minimal effort to catch you up. But with this movie, it works perfectly, and that all has to do with the character of Jack Burton. From his very first scene, Jack Burton is established as a no-nonsense tough guy, very reminiscent of John Wayne. He's very aware of how cool he is, always walking with a swagger and referring to himself in the third person.
You know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this?
Cool?
The only problem being that Burton is not cool. He's not competent, and he never knows what's going on, nor does he really care to know.
What?
Whereas most good movies will keep everything moving and try to disguise the exposition in natural ways, there are several moments in Big Trouble where the action stops and everyone just tries to explain the plot to Burton as if he is just coming in halfway through the final season of Lost.
Yeah, sort of. It's hard to explain.
Try real hard.
In reality, Jack Burton is not the hero of the movie. His friend Wang Chi is. Even though we see the film through Burton's eyes, his friend Wang knows exactly what's going on. He's an excellent fighter, and he really ends up leading Jack along through the whole movie. Director John Carpenter actually referred to Jack Burton as the sidekick who thinks he's the leading man.
Ready? Follow the leader. 1, 2, 3. We may be trapped.
There were tons of movies, TV shows, comic books that dealt with this kind of framework of an American coming into this mystical world and ends up saving the day with the help of his Asian sidekick. And from the outside, that's exactly what this is. Except with this film, the roles are reversed. Wang Chi really saves the day, and Jack Burton ends up being mostly there just for comic relief. I love how self-aware this film is, and it does not hold back on how weird it gets, often seemingly just to confuse Burton even more.
We'll come out no more.
What? Huh? What'll come out no more?
However, with a film like this, one needs to be very careful when marketing it. Since the film plays off some very old tropes, it is important to make clear that the film is a reversal of them. But much to Carpenter's dismay, the studio executives did not seem to get the movie. After watching the film, several executives were worried that Kurt Russell's character was not coming off as heroic enough. Carpenter tried to explain that this was actually the whole point of the character, but in the end they had to shoot a new opening scene where the character Egg Shen declares Burton to be a hero. This scene doesn't really hurt the movie, but in retrospect, it doesn't make too much sense either. Other executives actually wanted the humor to be cut out entirely and for the film to be played straight. Since the studio heads clearly did not understand the movie, the film's promotional campaign had a very similar approach. Posters were, for the most part, alright, but many of the artists clearly had a hard time drawing Kurt Russell.
If they would have recognized me, you couldn't from the picture, and it didn't mean anything. I remember the ads were, "Who is this?" or "Where's he going?" And it was like, "Oh yeah,
Who cares?
The film was rushed through production to beat out Eddie Murphy's film The Golden Child, which had many clear similarities to it, as well as many of the same actors. Yet with the rushed release, Big Trouble in Little China ended up coming out 1 week before James Cameron's Aliens, a huge sequel that easily knocked Big Trouble into obscurity. The film's failure was blamed on director John Carpenter, leading him to make independent films from then on, greatly disillusioned with the studio system. And on the subject of John Carpenter, the director had clearly established himself as one of the best of the day. He made films such as Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, and Starman. And in Big Trouble, Carpenter shows he clearly has a love for these older kung fu and Hong Kong action films, replicating many of the stunts and over-the-top sound effects which were popularized in these films. Though Carpenter has always been known for having a very widescreen look and keeping shots more pulled back, this look fits perfectly as it acts kind of as a callback to the films he's referencing. The creatures and special effects are also just wonderful, and though they don't necessarily hold up as looking real today, they fit perfectly with the atmosphere and tone Carpenter is creating. One effect I especially love is whenever the characters are flying through the air, they are shown in front of a rear projected screen just playing loops of a blurred background whizzing behind them. It's a very stylistic choice that really sums up much of Carpenter's approach to the film. Another thing that's cool about John Carpenter is that he did not just direct the film, he also did the music for it. In fact, he's done the music for almost all of his films, most famously for Halloween, and I think this is one of my favorite scores of his. It's not quite as pronounced as his one for Halloween, yet it sets the tone with its fun 80s synths combined with rock music. Many films and TV shows over the years, when covering anything Chinese or really Asian in general, would try to replicate these stereotypical music cues and just immediately come off as goofy, corny, or cringy, something Carpenter was clearly trying to avoid. With this soundtrack comes a hilariously 80s music video featuring fellow directors Tommy Lee Wallace and Nick Castle. So now we move on to the actors, and we have another great cast for this one. Kurt Russell gives a brilliant performance as Jack Burton, and as John Carpenter mentioned, it's pretty rare for actors to be so willing to make fun of themselves and look stupid in a film. But Kurt Russell seemed to really get what Carpenter was going for and adapted to it quite well. Kim Cattrall also does a great job.
I remember being impressed with how fast Dennis and Kim Cattrall could talk. They were so good at it.
Kim especially could really rip that dialogue going.
Rip it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dennis Dunn is also just perfect for the role. Apparently Carpenter was originally wanting Jackie Chan after seeing the first Police Story, and though I love Jackie Chan, I think Dunn was a great choice, and he clearly shows lots of dedication to the role, as he did many of his own stunts, especially the ones where he wielded swords. James Hong also gives a wonderful performance as Lo Pan. He's one of the most famous and prolific Chinese-American actors around, sporting to this date 440 acting credits, including Chinatown and Blade Runner, and is still working today at the age of 91. So there you have it, Big Trouble in Little China, one of my favorite movies and one I love talking about. So if you'd like to watch this movie, it's available on all the usual streaming sites as a rent or buy option. And physically, there are a lot of options for you too. This is not necessarily the best copy you can get. It's pretty bare bones with just the film and a commentary track with Kurt Russell and John Carpenter. But if you're looking for something a little extra, there are several Blu-ray and Steelbook special editions that are also really cool if you're into that. Otherwise, this DVD plays the movie well enough, and it only cost me about $5. So, you can make the call. But before I go, I was wondering, what's your favorite John Carpenter film? He's made all kinds, from movies on killer cars to biopics on Elvis, so I'm always curious which of his films attracts people the most. But other than that, like and subscribe, and be sure to keep watching movies. Alright, I'll see you next week.